And so you want to layer AI on top of that, you're going to get a lot of nonsense. So we think AI is expensive with all this, token maxing or whatever. Well, that's subsidized expensive.
Yeah.
What happens when it's not subsidized expensive? It's hundreds of small improvements all over the organization that cumulatively create operational excellence.
So I'm here today with Joel. I'm really privileged. I've been looking forward to speaking with him for a while. Joel has a real wealth of experience. He's been an entrepreneur. He's done scale-ups. He's done turnarounds. Been an investor. Just has really deep knowledge, deep understanding, and very, very pragmatic. And has been around through previous changes, not just AI, but through the web era, through cloud. So very excited to hear what he's doing as the CEO of LumiQ, and to hear more about what his customers, what LumiQ's customers are doing. So, Joel, if you want to just give maybe like 2-3 minute background on how you got here, and your experience through previous technological shifts.
Well, that's a long question. I'm originally a history major and graduate student, so I was always interested in how we got here, but really over many thousands of years. So I could, how far would you want to go back?
We'll start with fire, yeah.
Yeah. How did I get here? Well, I got a job in sales because I was unqualified to do anything else when I graduated with a graduate degree in history, and I started off in ladies' underwear. And then I pivoted to Apple Computer in the early 1990s. So I'm quite the fossil when it comes to, I guess, a lot of folks working in technology. So I spent 12 years, selling software and hardware, and then working for entrepreneurs, and then said, well, the only way to get a promotion is to start a company. And so I started 2 companies. First one in '99, which failed. Second one in 2005, which succeeded and went through multiple levered buyouts by private equity, and rode that through 3 of them, and it was very good returns for everyone involved. And then I exited 2022, spent 3.5 years, working part-time, and then got involved in a business I had invested in called LumiQ, and I've been running this company, which is a content business. So it's not a traditional SaaS business. It has like a SaaS business model. We license content for designated accountants through our app, and really the business group has grown really fast in the last 7 years because the content is really solved a tremendous problem for a lot of designated accountants, which is their continuing education was not enjoyable. And we really decided, the founders of this business said, we're going to make this really enjoyable, like really interesting, engaging information, content. And they did that, and the business has been very successful. So it's really fun. I listen to a lot of the content because I learn a lot, and I like learning. And but customers license it on a basis of like we have 2 models, on a consumption model and a term model. So I just taken over this business as a CEO a year ago, and which is very different than founding a business. It's kind of like building a house. Like if you build it from scratch, you kind of know how it's built from foundation up and all the mechanics behind the drywall. Whereas when you inherit a business, it's more like a renovation, and you get behind the drywall and you start figuring out how it actually works.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, so our audience is mid-market leaders. Many of them are relatively new operators to PE portfolio companies. So I think that's a familiar place to be. So why don't you take us inside LumiQ's AI journey, or at least the portion that you've experienced and been responsible for. So where did you start? What have you tried thus far? And what did you learn about what AI does, and where it doesn't create value?
As far as our product is concerned, the AI doesn't impact the product. It's more like, what is the AI impact or potential value for our operations of the business, which is a different equation. And so, yeah, it's been very exciting. A lot of experimentation, really on a kind of on the periphery, in the sense that, let's get an AI power dialer for the BDRs, or we've got this new AI accounting package. I'm looking at it. It's nice, but it's like, it to me, it's got a few, like, you can ask it some queries, and I think it does some automated stuff that's pretty cool. But I don't know if it's a paradigm shift in how accounting systems work. And I've been around accounting systems for a long time. I used to sell them, but it's certainly faster. I've talked to the staff, and we just went live 6 weeks ago, so this is early days. And they're saying, this used to take me half an hour, now it takes me 5 minutes, right? So this is good. We've used it. We script podcasts. We have quizzes for these podcasts because they're for continuing education, and AI can come up with a lot of those, sort of quizzes quite quickly and, efficiently. So that's neat. We can, obviously, when I review financial statements, for example, I get the year-end statements from the financial team. I'll have Claude, run through the 10 tabs. And so, hey, and then I'll have Gemini run through it, and then I'll run through it, right? And in fact, it's interesting, every intelligence, both artificial and authentic, we'll call it, my intelligence, find different issues.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think one of the things, what's interesting, so I'll give you an example. So Claude found a lot of technical, like, this is a mismatch, this field, this cell, and this tab should really equal that cell on the 7th tab, but there's like a slight variance, it'll find those kind of details. Gemini took a more sort of macro view, said, hey, there's been a real big swing on the EBITDA. This is really unusual because our EBITDA shot up. It's like, something's, either this is a mistake or there was a major operational change to the organization. So it's kind of taking a macro view. And I was spotting other stuff like, the budget on this line item really didn't make sense. How did that come to be, right? Based on what I know about the context of the business. So that was sort of an interesting exercise. So they all have a value, right? Both authentic and artificial intelligence. But I would say, and so I've got lots of other little examples like that where we're having fun with AI. But the fundamental problem, and I think this is a problem for a lot of businesses, is not all businesses take care of their data. And the data in this business was not all clean, and there's a lot of data. We have thousands of customers, and they consume thousands of podcasts. You can imagine how much data we'd like to analyze to make informed decisions. And the infrastructure just wasn't there. And, and so we have a bunch of tools, and like one tool will report it differently than another tool because, the data is not all clean. And it's like, well, what's the truth? And then we put in Snowflake because now we have a data, at least we're bringing the disparate data together in one spot. And that tells us a different story than something else. And so we are in a process right now, and even in our CRM system, which is Salesforce, there's a lot of data hygiene issues. And once we brought into Snowflake, we finding, there are customers that don't use the system that pay us, and there are customers that do use the system that don't pay us, and what's going on here? Right? And so you want to layer AI on top of that, you're going to get a lot of nonsense. And right, when you just don't have the foundations, the real clean data and the clean and the really strongly defined processes and such, right? And so we're in a journey right now to remedy all of that. And this is not something you could do overnight. It takes a lot of effort and smart people and time, right?
You mentioned the data hygiene element. I think that's a massive one that I hear a lot. Garbage in, garbage out. If a human can't figure it out, how can an AI possibly figure it out? Were there, when you think of the strategy around this, were there other elements, say around process, governance, other things you're considering? Or for you, was it just, hey, the data comes first and then we'll worry about all these other things on top of it?
Well, it's funny you mentioned governance. It's funny you're hearing lots of case studies of, we have an AI policy internally. We obviously have corporate accounts with Anthropic and Gemini. But, I said, well, okay, but are we monitoring? I mean, any employee can pull a whole bunch of data, go off into their personal account and throw it in there, right? And I think maybe out of just convenience or something, but really to make sure that we're educating our employees of the potential impact of doing that. And all of a sudden, someone searches AI and finds confidential information about our business because an employee had pulled data into a CSV file and uploaded it into their personal cloud account, right?
So did you, just to interject there, do you have a corporate Claude license for every single team member, and they can go in and they can ask Claude questions about?
So we have a corporate, not every single team member. We have a Claude license. It's been adopted in product management and in finance. Mm-hmm. There's no, obviously not every team member needs the AI license for what their tasks or what they have to do, right?
Yeah.
I mean, look, for the most part, I see it as a productivity tool. I'm more interested in the macro with AI right now. I mean, I got to straighten out all our data sets, and it's going to make us, and we've already seen a lot of productivity gains with AI and with just software in general. And the business is getting much more productive in that regard. But I think the macro, the economics of the AI industry as an investor, and the cost of the infrastructure and the TAM assumptions of Anthropic and similar seem a little incredible right now. And I think this is the general consensus of the market. Show us the ROI.
Yeah.
This is not an efficient system. I mean, SaaS is tremendously efficient. Like, my last business had 93% gross margins, right, after support and hosting costs, and this business is even higher. So it's like, that's not the case for AI. In fact, I know people run AI-based software companies, gross margins are like 50, 60%. I'm sure because of the compute cost. And so that's harder to scale. Never mind, the negative cash flow we're seeing out of, or who knows, they're private, most of them, but like, these AI companies. And so they're going to have to get more efficient.
I mean, just to interject there, Google yesterday evening, for the first time in 20 years, announced that they're free cash flow negative, which is incredible considering how much revenue they generate. So
yeah. And so we think AI is expensive with all this, token maxing or whatever. Well, that's subsidized expensive.
Yeah.
What happens when it's not subsidized expensive, right? Then is this actually a viable model? And I think longer term they'll probably figure it out and they'll get it to be much more efficient. But I am concerned about overbuild. Software companies have taken a real beating in this environment, and I think some of the real systems of truth out there are going to be very resilient. They'll layer in AI functionality, but I just can't see. I mean, maybe I'm naive, but I just can't see those companies disappearing. And I think some of them are very value priced right now. They're trading at 10, 12 times cash flow with growth companies. And I was like, so I'm a bit of a, I'm a little skeptical. Been through, the .com and the fiber boom, and, we've seen this human behavior over and over again. And I think it's going to take far longer based on just the experience and with this company. And I'm sure 98% of companies are similar. It's going to take longer for the enterprise to adopt AI efficiently than perhaps AI companies are hoping.
Yeah, I mean, I think the cost one is real. I've heard that from some companies I'm invested in. That was, I think it was this November, December, 17-person startup that was making about $1 million a year in ARR, got hit with an $85,000 a month bill for Claude. And so
their entire ARR.
Yeah. So, what's happened, they evolved faster than everyone else, but very quickly they moved to open source models. And not only has the price come down by over an order of magnitude, but also the accuracy is improved, funny enough, not to mention it's, on their own stack. And so I've just seen a lot of companies go through that, where they just start experimenting, token maxing, and then quickly realize this doesn't make sense. I think it's really interesting how you mentioned at LumiQ, you started with a much more deliberate response where only select teams get access to these tools. You're thinking about the data right away rather than just, honestly, most companies I see just wholesale, hey, everyone gets Claude and just do what you can, build some skills. And, I've yet to see that actually generate returns. I think it's generated some interesting demos, but I've yet to see anyone other than, I'd call it the engineering teams, right? And
so we use Slack and Salesforce. And I've been a Salesforce user for 20 years. And I love the system. It's great. I like mucking around with it. I'd run lots of reports and dashboards. I create them all. And and Slack now has a chatbot, which is powered by Anthropic, that can go into your Salesforce data. And you've got to make sure you've got the settings right so it doesn't like change everything. So disastrously. but I wanted to know sales cycles by price point and win rates by price point. So, and I had, give me price points between 0, whatever, 1 and 10,000, 10 and 30, 30 plus, right? So just break it up. And I asked the chatbot, and it came back with information I just knew was like really wrong.
Yeah.
It just wasn't right. And I know it was wrong because I know enough of it. So I just then ripped the dashboard in 30 minutes and got the right information. And so, but the interesting thing I've heard is people, for whatever thing, believe because it's AI, it's probably right, or it's most like it's got to be right. What I've heard is people believe AI.
Yeah.
Right. And if you don't have, you understand the context, you got to be careful what it spits out, because it can be wrong.
I think what's fascinating with that is, that's an area very well. So you can just mentally, you have that sense for it, and you're well aware. And I think most people have an area of expertise that they know deeply, and they'll immediately say, oh, the AI is just off base. But then the same person goes to something different, like to a legal contract. And then you see what Claude spits out, and suddenly it's, or more medicine, I think, is a great example. Many people are doing that now, where it's just, ChatGPT says X. This sounds very convincing. It must be true. And there's just this cognitive dissonance to forget, wait, for a topic I knew well, it wasn't all that accurate. And in some cases, just straight up wrong. And then a topic I don't know, it feels really correct.
Yeah, so exactly. I call it Dr. AI.
Yeah.
Because I'm like that. I'll go to AI and ask, like, oh, I got some ailment, and, no, 100%. So I think it's really cool. I think back that the efficiency has to be better. I think your underlying infrastructure has to be accurate if you're going to use it in a business, which is more of a challenge than necessarily the AI.
One other thing too is I think the culture as well. So a lot of the businesses we'll work with, they haven't really changed what they do on a day-to-day basis in 10 years, for example. It's just, same system, same tasks. Maybe the customers shift a little bit, but very predictable with single-digit annual growth. Now being thrust into this, there's this question about, well, how do we really, how do we change the business in a real way? And my answer is always, there's no silver bullet, right? There's no one feature, one software that's going to change everything. A lot of it's going to be a series of small wins, a combination of process improvement, software, and yes, some AI. So I'm curious at LumiQ and in your prior firms, how do you build that culture of continuous improvement? And if you go into, I don't know if you ever had this, but if you go into a company that doesn't have that culture, how do you instill it and create it in a way that's, both effective and not too disruptive to the organization?
Well, obviously it has to come from the top, right? If there's disinterest at the top, it's never going to happen. So that's number one. Number two is, very fortunately at LumiQ, people are young. I don't know what our average age is, but it's probably around 29. I'm guessing, but it's young. I'm the village elder, in the company. And so young people want to, this is the future. They want to learn, they want to change, they are curious. It's not like same old, same old. They want to see improvement. They want, you know, that they're thirsting for knowledge. So that's not an issue at this company. It's only a 7-year-old company.
Wow. Good
right?
for you.
Think how young it is, right? I mean, when you have a startup that's a 7, and it's a startup, is quite a, you know, it's a substantially grown startup, but it's only a 7-year-old company, and it's a very young cohort of staff. And it's similar at Firmex, my prior company, except they're all older now because that company was founded in 2005. But when we were in the early days, it was similar. And there's never hesitation for change. Because you know, things haven't been the same for very long. You know, I mean, the company grows, you know, 3 times as big as it was, you know, 3 years ago. Like, you know, and not to mention, when you have a company like that, 50% of the staff have been there for 18 months or less, right? You know, so you know, no one's really interested in doing the same. The key is, though, is that technology is an investment, and clean data is a mindset, and understanding the importance of being able to make informed decisions rather than guesses as far as, you know, the direction of the business, and also understanding the insights that you get from information as a key and a critical factor in the success of the business has to come from, you know, the CEO and the, you know, but I have had no resistance to that at all. And I also, there's a book I read years ago called The Myth of Innovation, or The Myths of Innovation. Scott Birkin, I think his name was, he worked at Microsoft. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But the best part of the book, the only part I remember now, was about Isaac Newton. And Isaac Newton, we like to believe, and this is relevant to this, you know, magic, you know, sprinkle the AI pixie dust on a company and magic will happen. So the belief is Isaac Newton discovered gravity because an apple fell on his head. Right? Sat under a tree and, oh, geez, that's the equation, right? And that's what the popular myth is. Was in fact, he was studying math for like 20 years, and he slowly made little insights over that time to finally figure out the equation for gravity. That's the same with a business. You know, it's hundreds of small improvements all over the organization. Some are a little bigger than others, but, like, you know, that cumulatively create operational excellence.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, so one of the things you know that I've been meaning to ask, if you think of the kind of 3 cohorts of companies, so you have the largest enterprises, and they're just pouring money into AI and BCG, and you know, they will adopt AI. How long it takes, who knows? It's a good question. Then you have all these AI native startups. So there's tens of billions, maybe hundreds now, pouring into this, which I honestly believe is almost like a new PE model, where it's, you know, create a platform and then try to do roll-ups, and in theory that's better. But then you have existing companies, existing mid-market players. And so you mentioned the companies you work at, the culture is inherently, everyone's used to change and improvement. That's just the culture. You know, do you have any thoughts on, is that something that can change? Have you seen it change successfully? Or is, you know, is it just fundamentally the companies that start with that culture ultimately will just surpass anyone that doesn't start with that culture, if that makes sense?
Well, I mean, obviously you got a big head start if you've got the culture and someone else doesn't, right? One of the challenges, I think, in these large companies is there's politics, and it's not what you do, it's what you appear to be doing. And so, right, you know, and there's a lot of sort of AI signaling. You know, now, can the culture change? I mean, culture changes if there's change at the top. You know, it doesn't change because someone writes a policy. Culture must change. You know, it's got to start at the top. I think the vast majority of people like to learn and change. Now, look, the answer is, the other challenge you could have in organizations is AI does automate a lot of manual tasks, and we have been automating a lot of manual tasks. Never mind just with AI, with software alone, right? You know, and so people are like, well, if you're taking away what I do, what am I going to be doing, right? And that's a legitimate concern.
Yeah.
Right. Well, you're either going to be doing something different, or learn something new, or you're going to be doing something somewhere else. So, and I can see, and I've heard there can be resistance, and this is like time forever with technological change, right? You know, whether it's AI or software, or, you know, I don't know, the steam engine, people have been resistant to automation in some cases, but you know, that's not a good strategy, because it's not going to stop.
And you know, I don't know if you've experienced those kind of reservations recently, but even in through past technological change, how do you manage the human element to make sure that, you know, everyone's bought in and the organization remains strong? You don't lose the best people for a given function.
Well, you'll never lose the best people, because the best people always have more to do than they have time. And I candidly, in our organization, very fortunately, it's growing, right? So there's more to do than there is time.
Yeah.
So if I can shed things that generally aren't that necessarily interesting to do anyway, and give it to the AI or, you know, piece of software, and then I can get on with driving, you know, other things that are more interesting, that are going to move the company forward. I mean, people are much more interested in doing that. So I don't see that as a problem with this cohort of staff that I have at LumiQ whatsoever, right? There's no resistance. I could certainly see it. Look, I used to go into, when I sold warehouse management systems and accounting software to wholesale manufacturers in Eastern US, and I've been into offices where we were replacing vacuum tubes to deliver paper between floors with software.
Yeah.
And people have been working there for 40 years.
Yeah.
They didn't want to change.
Yeah.
They didn't want to learn how to use the computer. They didn't want to whatever, right? I'm dating myself. This is like 25 years ago. But, you know, then that's not an environment that I'm working in, right?
Then when you think about investments, you know, there's always a classic build, buy, and I'd argue in some cases outsource kind of falls into that same category. So you have build, buy, outsource, or just don't invest. Do you think the calculus has changed at all for your businesses between, you know, call it the last 5 years since AI started, or is it basically the same?
You know, candidly, I still, and maybe I'm missing something. I hear these comments about, oh, we're going to get rid of our enterprise CRM system and vibe code it. I mean, I literally heard this, and I won't name names, from like a major, massive enterprise here in Canada, across the country. It's like, are you kidding me? like,
yeah,
right? Like, that's crazy. Yeah. Like, there's something called, you know, there's the you know, the economics of build it once, license it to tens of thousands of customers is way more economic than you having to build it and maintain it internally, right? To me, that's, and I see this in the media. People, oh, I threw out our CRM system or whatever, or I vibe coded. I'm like, okay, what do you have, 10 customers? You know, like, you know, like, you know, to me, that's crazy. I mean, now I'm going to have a bloated, you know, software development organization just to do what I could license for a fraction of the cost. Like, it's, I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something, Caleb. I don't know if you think that's a legitimate, you know, operating decision, but
yeah, I think the way I think about it now is like the biggest impact I've seen from AI, or like my current hypothesis is it's just very deflationary for software. So build costs have gone down, you know, quite a bit, especially for certain types of code. I think things like an enterprise CRM or an operating system, something like that, that's still very hard because it's so complex.
Sure.
But things like integrations and reports, yeah, that kind of, you know, relatively straightforward code, the cost has gone down. So I think it's just shifted the curve in terms of opportunities that didn't used to be economic, you know, on the margin, they're now more economical. But that doesn't necessarily mean you go out and you know, recreate everything from scratch. I think one of the challenges people are rediscovering, or especially at non-technical companies, the thought is, oh, Claude can do everything, or I can vibe code everything. Well, you know, you mentioned maintenance, security, privacy, it doesn't work. You know, I have a new customer coming in. we need to change our system. Oh, it doesn't do that. Now I have to go out and build a feature to do it, and it's not my job.
Yeah, it's not moving the needle for my business. Like I'm not in the business of selling software. I'm in the business of doing something else. The bigger the software gets, the more challenging it is to maintain and move forward. It just gets, the complexity of it gets, bigger and bigger and bigger. It's easy to spin up, version 1, but, try version 21. But look, the good news in my view is like, the exciting thing about AI, I think we've had a huge jump in entrepreneurship, which was a big problem for a few decades. People were not starting companies as much as they did in the past. And it was an open question in my mind, like, why? Because, new businesses drive a lot of employment. And I think that's encouraging, that, people are seeing opportunities to start companies. I think last I checked, there are more software engineers employed than ever before.
Yep.
If you look at the data, right? So you hear about all these layoffs and, whether it's just using AIs and, to get rid of these companies just became inefficient. So they had to lay off staff, or they wanted to spend money on data centers, so they lay off staff. But the fact is, the data is telling me we're just employing more engineers, software engineers than ever before. And which means there's going to be a lot more software, which is good. And I think you're right, it's going to be deflationary, but as a consumer of software, we're going to have a lot more choices. It's going to cost less. Great. It's going to make us all more productive, and businesses are going to be better for it. Yeah,
no, absolutely. I think that's actually a good segue. Another question, if you put on your capital allocator hat,
sure.
What, has AI changed what makes a business attractive to invest in? Especially if you think of mid-market companies, what are the things that they should invest in that will make them more valuable on a durable basis, and not just, in the next year? So has AI changed that, or is it still just, the basic, is it still just the same as it was 5 years ago?
I mean, look, it depends on the business, right? I mean, but look, I think it's like, I gave an example, sort of a funny example. So I was very technology forward, sat from an operations point of view, right? Because not all companies are software companies. They different businesses, they might be selling jewelry or, I don't know, commodities or whatever, right? Like with private equity, and I'm very familiar with private equity. I've invested in 8 different funds. I've sold the companies, been in 5 PE processes, and I had one bidder approach the last company I had, and it was funny. He was like, they often look for companies that are not well maintained.
Yeah,
because they're performing not as well. Obviously they could buy them for less and tune them up. And the comment was because we had so much technology rigged up in the company, like, you're well too tuned up, but there's nothing we can do with you. So we're going to pass. Look, I think your company just inherently more valuable when you employ technology. I just see AI as another wave of technology, right? I mean, when I started in my career, I was using payphones with quarters and filling out 3-sheet carbon paper for reports, right? So I see like, then, computers came along and cell phones and, then the internet and, then SaaS software and now AI. And it's just like, look, it's just making us more productive. And to me, if you don't employ, I mean, if you still ran your company using payphones and 3-sheet carbon paper, you probably wouldn't be in business anymore, right? So I think you gotta adopt the technology where it's suitable, and obviously, nowadays, again, it's back to my comment. You're going to be more valuable if you're more productive. It costs you less to do more, right? That's the name of the game, right?
I guess one of the things I'm thinking about there is, obviously it's better for the business. It's better for your balance sheet, better for your income statement. But in terms of return on invested capital, as you said, they actually like companies with low technology or that are underdeveloped from a technological standpoint.
Right.
Is it worth it for you as a company to make that investment now, to go through the pain, to spend the money, in order to improve your valuation? Or are you better off saying, why bother, right? Like if this is just, we're better off selling it and letting someone else, go through the trouble of doing this, technological transformation.
Well, look, as an operator, I went through 4 owners. So I don't see the business as just tied to one investor, right? As an operator, my DNA is make it better.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And why we get up in the morning, to make things better.
Yeah.
And so you're just wired to make it better. Right? So
well, thanks so much, Joel. Really appreciate your time.
A pleasure. Yeah, it was a great conversation. I look forward to seeing the article.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Right. Thanks, Caleb. Bye.